Hi, let's speak a little bit more about Tableau and some of the advanced things that you can do in it. So here is a chart that I've been preparing during this time of pandemic. This is in 2020 in September. So it's a common chart of number of infections in Colombia, number of cases reported, and by the time of the start of their symptoms. It's also showing like window average of the values over that. So this one was made on Vega Lite. So let's try to create something like that on Tableau. So of course, like the animation will be complicated, but at least we can do the window average very easily. So I just exported the data out of observable, and then I'm loading that here in Tableau. This is a very basic data set. I have a key that is going to be a date, and also a measurement that is going to be a value, how many cases were there by that time. So in this case, I'm going to change the aggregation level of the date to the day, and then now we can see these values. So I can switch that into bars, and then I have the first part of the chart. Now, if I want to compute the window average, then Tableau has a way of doing that, that is with table calculations. So what I'm doing is that I'm duplicating my measurement, and then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say right-click in here, and then you say add table calculation. There is a bunch of table calculations that you can use overall, like these ones in here. And for instance, we can say, let's use the moving average. So for the moving average, now you see that I have two ones. You are going to see that you have a table calculation whenever you see that triangle next to it. And then changing to this one, I'm going to say that this one is going to be a line, okay? So the other thing I want with that is that I can change the parameters of that window calculation. And in this case, the window average is quite accurate. It has, using the two previous values, I can click on that and say, you know what, I want like the full 7 window week, or 7 days window. That is going to be a week. So you can decide at what level you want to compute that. So that changes everything depending on how many dimensions you're including. So keep that in mind, but for the moment it's the default. It's actually what we want. And since I want to layer those, we are going to learn later about that in the course. You can do that very easily in Tableau by right-clicking on this one and say I want dual axis. So I don't know if you notice, but that's one of the dangers of dual axis. In here, it's actually a good usage of it because the two data sets are going to be speaking about the same number. But if you see, actually Tableau makes the mistake of arranging the axis to the extent of the domain. So actually, you have to right-click in here and say you want to synchronize the axis. So now it looks like a little bit more of what you want. I actually don't want to use colors for this. I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, I'm going to do that for all of them. So remember, when you're doing that in here, then since I'm using a layer chart, then you have attributes for both of them, or for the bars and for the line. And remember, this one in here is the mark that you're using, and in here we're using the mark line. So you can also change other attributes, like for instance, we can double code this to be the color, and then of course I messed up everything. So let's drag that and then hold Command. So that gives me that I'm not moving but duplicating things. So that actually looks closer to the other one. And then this one, I want to fix color that it's in red or something like that. And then now you can see it. So as you can see, the window average, it's quite useful and allows you to create these type of charts that were common like during the time of the pandemic. You can also apply that with other types of table calculations. I recommend you taking a look at all of the possible ones that you can create, and also the documentation is quite powerful, but sometimes it's difficult to measure. Like for instance, let's say this is the window average, and then let's create another one out of this one. Actually, let's duplicate this one, and then I'm going to get rid of this. But instead of using the window average, let's experiment what we'll get. Let's clear the table calculation, and let's say that we want to do this one with the running total. So yes, this is the total number of infections that we have had in Colombia. It's just been adding up those. So as you can see, it's quite easy, especially when you don't have extra dimensions in there. If we had more dimensions, then it starts getting complicated. Take a look at the documentation for that, because it's quite useful and powerful. Now, like 2 or 3 years ago, like around, I want to say 2016 or 2017, Tableau came up with a concept that I really like. And it's extremely powerful, but at the same time, it's kind of difficult to use. But when you get a grasp to it, you realize that it's quite nice, and you can build really interesting things out of that. And those things, and that feature, it's called level of detail. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to load kind of complex data set that I like, that it's the FIFA data set. That contains is a Kaggle data set that contains players from the FIFA video game. And it has a ton of attributes, both categorical and numerical. So let's play with that. So for those of you that know, the FIFA video game is a soccer video game, like football, like the real football, the one you kick things with your foot. I'm kidding, but so not kidding. So basically, you have all of these categorical attributes that you see in here, or at least Tableau thinks some of those are categorical, although they shouldn't be. And then you have different attributes. Like for instance, you can say, I want to see things by position. So let's say I put this here on the rows. So these are all the different positions that soccer players can play with. So as you can see, some of them have a null position, which is interesting. And then you have a bunch of numbers that represent different attributes from that data, or for that player, I guess. For instance, one of those is like the overall attribute, and the higher the better is the overall attribute, and that tells you like what players are better than others. So when you do this, and I really like this button in Tableau because it lets me see the values immediately. Then it starts showing me numbers, and then I could go and even rank that and say, okay, strikers are the ones that have highest overall. Now you have to be very careful with this, and remember what Tableau did in here is that it took a dimension, so it's separating by that dimension, and then it's computing the sum of all the overall that are in there. So remember, if you click in here and then you go and see all the underlying data, this one has like a lot of different players that play in that position. In this case, 2,000 players. And since we are using the sum as the aggregation operation, or then it's basically, this is not showing us that in average, the strikers have that. It's the total number. So that one doesn't really make sense. So be careful with that. Every time you're analyzing, don't rush to make a decision or a judgment, because you might be comparing apples to oranges. So I can change this to an average, or I can even, one thing that I really like in Tableau is that I can go with medium, that it's less susceptible for outliers. And now I can compare better, and then I can see that actually they weren't strikers, the ones that had the high, like in average, the higher values in there. So having done that, let me get rid of the sorting, and you can see that we have a sorting because you see that icon in here. If you right click in there, then you can see clear sort, and then we see more elements in here. Let's say that I want to compare, like for instance, let's see that I want to see this by nationality as well. So when so I have this nice average that is telling me that I think these are center midfielders, maybe, have an overall value of 67. But if I go and add the nationality, then it shows me all the average values, but first grouping by position and then grouping by nationality. So this is really nice. Now I can see all the different nationalities, but like for instance, here is beautiful Colombia. It's 67. So is that good or bad? I don't know. Do you remember what was the value of the overall by nationality or by position? So what if I want to compute that? How do I get the median, but for nationality, so I can keep it in here? So that's where the level of detail operations come to play. So in Tableau, if you want to create a new calculated field, one of the easiest ways is by starting on something. We have already the median. If you double click in there, it lets you write a formula inside that. So the way level of calculation works is that you use curly brackets, level of detail. And then inside there, you can come and say, let's see if we can put it in here. Then you can say, I want this to be fixed to the position. And basically what that's doing, and I think the proper format is this. You say fixed, and then what is this element, and then what are you going to be using inside. So basically what this is saying is that instead of slice and dicing by nationality and position, as we were doing before, what I want you to do is to only use position. That's why I say it fixed. There are 3 levels of detail. One is called include, that is going to include a new dimension. Another one it's called exclude, that removes dimension. And the third one is called fix. So you can check the documentation for that. So now I have the values in here, and this is quite nice. I can actually save this here as a measurement, I think. Can I? Well, it seems like it doesn't want me to do that. I just did it a minute ago, so I wonder what might be the reason. Well, I don't know. So let's leave it in there. Like, what if I change, like, for instance, this should be like the average, like, although for each one of the players is actually getting the same. Interesting that right now it's not letting me drag this here. Probably wonder if it has to do with that I was dragging that in that place. I don't know. So another way of adding that as a calculation in here will be to actually create a calculated field, and then I can say overall by position, and then I can paste the formula in here, maybe without the average, and then of course it's going to tell me that I have an error. Then I can get rid of this. That seems we are missing an element. So what will be the error in here? We are missing a crossing bracket. Like, what about that? That looks better. So now I have overall by position, so I can replace that, so I can have an actual better name, and I have that. So now that I have the overall by position, I can actually come and create another one that is, for instance, the median overall. That is the one that we have in here, that is going to be using the 2 levels. And then I can subtract that with the overall by position. And then when you do that, of course, you get an error in here. Let's try getting this without the aggregation. So I actually do it without it. And then that's what I want. So this is actually computing what is the value of each one of them versus the average. So now if I sort, now I actually have the lower ones and the higher ones. So the cool thing about this is that, and this actually should be, I think, with average. Yes, this makes a little bit more sense. Is that I now can go and move that into the color. And if I move that into the correct color, let's try that again. So here for all of them, so I can put it into the color. And then with that, making sure that this is using the proper one. So for instance, like this, it's color coding by telling me which ones are above and which ones are below. So actually for this one, for instance, the overall by position is 67, and this one is 69, so it seems I have an error in there. I wonder if I should, oh, maybe it's because I had the average in there versus, yes, that's what I wanted. So so that way I'm using median for both of them. So in the other one I was using average. So now the cool thing about this is that I can have them color coded by that. This one looks good. I can get rid of this one if I want, just leave it out. Or something that could be useful using the same idea of the dual axis is you can start clicking here and say I want to see the dual axis, And then I'm going to leave the median, that is this one. I'm going to see that as a bar. And the overall, that is like the average, I want to see that as a shape. And I like changing here the shape and putting that into a cross. So by doing that, I should be seeing the median in front of them, and then I can get and I can do the comparison. However, as you can see, I'm facing again the same problem, and is that the axes aren't synchronized. So let's go and synchronize them. So I think I can do that here. So I do say synchronize, and now it makes sense in there. Main problem is that I shouldn't be seeing these elements, and I wonder if I can change the order or something so I can see them. Oh yes, maybe one of the things I can do is that I can remove the color from this. Yes, so now I can see them more clearly. Yes, so that way I put them on top. So right now it has a gray color. You can change it to another one if you want, or even make this one bigger. So it's good. So now you can see the average and do the comparison versus that average for the position. Okay. So having done that, let's duplicate and see a couple other versions of this. Like something else that it's very useful is that you could now get rid, for instance, of the nationality. And instead of getting rid of that, because if I remove it, then it becomes something like this. And it's not really showing me anything. But if I want still to see them in detail, then I can do them not right there, right here. So in the one that is computing the medium, I can say I want the detail of nationality. So now I'm going to create one for each one of those, and then the bar doesn't make sense, but I can go back to the shape and then see all of the elements. And since I have the color coding, I see which ones are below and which ones are above. And this is way better representation than just showing the average, because remember that when you're just showing the average, you're not seeing the uncertainty of that. So I recommend you taking a look at this. Now, the other one that it's very nice is that Tableau also has an option here for showing you like the average with a confidence interval. That is really cool. You just drag it to the level of detail that you want it. And then it's going, and that one is average. We were using median. So now we can get rid of the median. And that's also another view. But since we are using the color coding, now I can see the two of them also with the interval. So take a look at level of detail functions. Those are really powerful if you know how to master them. And as you saw, sometimes you can struggle with them, but they are worth your time.